If you can stop talking for 10 seconds, that would be fantastic. You want to hit the start timer on there? You want to hit? You want to start podcasting, genius?
Don't feel bad for me though, even though I am an unwed mother of 2 dogs. One of them has a drug problem. Yeah, the other one is a chronic masturbator. Also true.
And you know that it's a Bratz with a Z doll because it has weird, colorful hair. Yeah, she knows. It's racially ambiguous. Right? And there's like a 60% chance that it's got a lower back tattoo. Right? But then when you check the box, it's like, 100% chance of mental illness. All right, cool.
Hello and welcome to Carnival Personnel Sideshow. I'm Jacques.
I'm Joe.
And we have another comedian who I've got to know over like the last few months, doing shows and just going to other shows. So everybody, let's just jump into it and right off the bat, welcome Jenni Howell into Sideshow. How are you, Jenni?
I'm so great. How are you guys doing today?
and Joe speak, that's fantastic.
Yeah, right. That's an 11 for me.
That's a lukewarm is 11.
Yeah,
great.
Pretty much.
If the car isn't parked in the garage, letting the engine perm to sleep, it's anything above that is just this is what we get. So I met you a few weeks ago when we were both on Greg Bogus's Mondo comedy show over at the Luna.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting show, but we'll get into that in a bit. But right off the bat, one of the first questions I asked is, how did you fall into this awful world of stand-up comedy?
Well, it's something that I've been excited about for a really long time, like as long as I can remember, but I never really had the guts to do it. My current career, my current day job is that I teach yoga and meditation, but just prior to that career, I worked in entertainment production for close to 15 years. And I produced the technical production for a lot of different tours, including some amazing artists like Chris Rock and Robin Williams. And so I had always had the experience of being, kind of behind the scenes, backstage, working on technical stuff, loading tractor trailers, the really glamorous stuff associated with entertainment. And I kind of tried to break up with entertainment a few times, and the last one kind of stuck, and I have been teaching yoga and meditation for about 12 years now. And with the practices of yoga and meditation, every year I try and do something that's feels a little bit scary. And I was actually going to try stand up at the beginning of 2020. I had started to prepare for that, mentally, because I feel like it takes people a while before they actually kind of like jump into this, at least in the people that I've spoken to. And that didn't happen because of COVID, and I kind of shelved that for a while. And then at the beginning of 2021, the beginning of 2022, I finally went back and started researching of how to get involved. And my plan was, I'm just going to go and bomb in places that no one will recognize me. And so it's funny that you talk about the Luna Theater because I own a business in that building. So people could recognize me very easily. And I did really poorly at that gig. So
You should have gone the unknown comic route with just a bag over your head at first. Do you know what the unknown comic is? I'm sorry. I made an old reference.
Oh, there was a guy in the 70s who would, go on shows like The Gong Show, and truly just a paper bag on his head with the eyes cut out, and he was the unknown comic. Guy ends up doing tours, like big tours, a big comic through like the 70s and the early 80s, just the unknown comic.
I mean, the merch on this guy's, list was just incredible.
Yeah, they sell masks that they give you his free mask at Market Basket every time you go shopping.
Wow. So has there been any like deep dives as to the identity of the masked?
Yeah, I think he unveiled himself like in the 80s or 90s when people stopped caring after the Gong Show was canceled.
So a lot of people end up falling into this because they don't have health insurance and can't, get therapy or can't afford the copay. So they're like, oh, I can't afford therapy, I'm going to go do open mic. But back up, you worked in production on like comedy tours for like absolute giants of giants.
Yeah. I mean, I was still working in entertainment when I helped the production for Robin Williams' Weapons of Mass Destruction tour. And the first actual, like, it's just so cool seeing Chris Rock's special come out, because the first time I ever focused lights on a stage was at for like a national act, was at the Orpheum in Boston, and it was for Chris Rock, and he was so lovely to work with, and I couldn't believe how cool he was, and just like, I don't know, he was so great to work with and just lovely, and I was like, okay, like I feel like I can do this, so he was part of like me starting in music and production. So
when you were touring with the comics back then and back in the day, did you have any idea that maybe you wanted to do stand-up comedy at that point, or was something that just sort of like kind of came up more recently?
Well, to be like super accurate and clear, when we worked on the Robin Williams tour, I wasn't touring with my team, but we had done the design and had organized all of the technical production for the tour. So I had guys out on the road and I was more locally based. I just thought it was like very scary, because almost every other art, you're either performing with other people and there's other stuff happening, or like, you can hide behind like a bass beat, or you can hide behind a drum set or a guitar, where with a comedy, it's your own mind and it's you saying it, and that's terrifying. So I never imagined that I'd have the guts to do it. And then when I started doing it, I'm sure you guys know, it's like a weird kind of drug where it's like, it's awful. And then you get like a little bit of laughs and it's like, oh, I need that drug. I need that.
Just the thought of, walking into a room and having anybody applaud that you're there, even if it's just out of courtesy, is like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be quite frank. People don't find yoga and meditation or comedy because they're doing great. Like, you don't find these things because you're like whole and good and you just want to like get even more good. Like, people are like, hi, my self-esteem is shit. Please help me. Applaud me. Yeah.
I haven't got to the applaud me part yet. So when you started, it's like you said, it is awful beyond all. There's no reason to do it. There's no upside. It's the worst of the worst with the worst people. Or that's what it can be. And I don't know, how long ago did you start, and where did you start going at first when you said, okay, I'm going to go where somebody's not going to recognize me and I'm going to do my 5 minutes and drive out of there as quickly as possible before,
Yeah. Well,
where and when did you start?
Yeah. Well, so I had mentally started really preparing like in 2021. So I haven't been doing it that long. And I really, I just started trying to find listings for open mics. And I didn't really understand where to find them exactly. And I kept chickening out when I would find these open mics, I would just like not go. So I have like all these like weird saved screenshots from like, just weird, like, I don't know. I ended up on Reddit looking for open mics and it was like terrible. I don't know. I just didn't know where to look. And I then reached out to a woman that we, in my previous career, that we had booked for some like corporate events. And she was like, you should take a class. She's like, just so that you don't eat shit too hard. Wait, can I swear on this?
Yeah. You're the first one ever.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, you're first person on our podcast to swear. Yeah.
We're on PBS actually,
well-
like right between Sesame Street and Blue's Clues. I think that's where our time slot is.
Oh,
That's
No,
our
we're
sweet
fine.
spot.
so are we helping or hurting? So yeah, so her name is Kelly McFarland. I don't know if you guys know her. She's incredibly funny, and she had just like this. I'm jumping all over the timeline here. ADHD is a blessing and a curse. So she was a comic that we had like booked several times for different corporate clients. And I reached back out to her at the beginning of 2022 and I was like, I'm going to do this. And she's like, you need to take a class so that way you just don't eat so much shit. And then a friend of hers is this guy, Mike Katrobis. And so I didn't know him at all. I just signed up for this class, totally blind. And I was terrible. If you ever interview Mike, he can confirm. He was like, okay, like, and like, are you gonna dress like the way that you're dressing? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, you know that you have a different kind of look. And I'm like, no, I've been hanging out with like roadies and yogis. So I had no idea. But so I took I think it was like 3-week class, maybe 3 or 4-week class with him. And we did a performance at the end of the class, and that was it from there. And then like a couple weeks later, I was like, well, I invested all this time and I invested a lot of stress preparing for this and trying to figure out if I'm funny at all. I need to give it like a real go. And so then I just started hitting all the open mics as hard as I possibly could. So I was doing like 4 or 5 mics a week. And terrible. But then every time that I got up, I was getting just a little bit better and I was writing a lot. And so I think that kind of expedited things because I really jumped in and I threw myself at it hard. And I started going to a lot more comedy shows. I spent a lot of money. But yeah, and I just, I met some incredible people that were kind enough, including Mike and people like Steve Bjork, fantastic guy. They've been so helpful in mentoring me and just giving me feedback, and I try and implement it right away instead of saying, no, you know what you're talking about. But
yeah, Jacques, you and her are kind of on the same track. Like you book,
like
shows.
this guy.
Oh, wait. Hey, look at that, Steve Bjork.
yes, what? He's got a business card? Settle down. That's amazing.
No, I talked to him. I've talked with him several times. I actually got his book a few years ago. One of my favorite like New England comics. My sister gave me the heads up on him before we moved back to the area. I lived overseas a few years ago with my family, and when we moved back, my sister's big into comedy, and she at some like Knights of Columbus fundraiser saw him and says, you have to see this guy next time he comes in town. And we've been trying to, like, he's been super great, like trying to schedule. We usually do this on the weekends, and you know what? He's usually busy on weekends, so it's hard to lock him down, but super, super, super nice guy. And just the kind of comics that I like. Crazy smart, like absolutely. His comedy is just super, super smart. I'm sorry, Joe, you were saying?
No, I was just saying that as Jen's telling about her background and kind of her getting her feet wet in comedy, it's kind of like what you're going through right now. I mean, but also the same thing, like your background, as far as your day job was before, COVID ruined the world, was booking entertainment shows and working on entertainment and tours and stuff like that. And getting, that part of the entertainment industry exposure. But then also now, like, you're diving into stand-up comedy and going to like 4 or 5 shows a week, doing open mics, spending a lot of the time on the road, listening to a lot of podcasts, talking to a lot of Joe on the phone.
Yeah. Joe. Well, Joe is my sounding board. Do you have a sounding board? Do you work with anybody? What is your process of like before you beta test it at a mic? Do you bounce it off one person or a couple people when you're working out material? What's kind of your process of like taking it from your head to the paper to a mic?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, yeah, I mean, in addition to Mike and Steve, Dave Radigan has been a really lovely person and helping me with, concepts. And there's a bunch of really great comics that I've met. And so I can work through some material with them, but I'm kind of weird because I feel very unqualified. I probably shouldn't say that, because there's been some amazing bookers that have, Greg included, that have just been like, yeah, I'll give you a shot. And so I feel a little embarrassed bringing some of my ideas to, a single sort of sounding board. And so I've always used comedy when I teach yoga. I'm not like a laughter yoga teacher, but when I'm teaching, I think that humor is like a really powerful medicine. And I've always thought that, especially with yoga. And I've always kind of been against like the idea that yoga needs to be like super serious and everybody needs to like, be wearing like white Lululemon pants. And, like, I think that's kind of gross. And so
I prefer
really
black Lululemon pants myself. So.
They're more slimming. They're more slimming.
Oh man, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. I was actually an ambassador for them, which is hilarious now because I have so many jokes. Yeah. Anyways, but so I will sometimes, if the content is appropriate and it feels like a right moment, I'll like throw in jokes while I'm teaching and see how it goes.
No, I mean it's like I said, I'm lucky that I have Joe. I generally will come up with an idea and I will run it through and work it out with Joe weeks, maybe months before I even tell my wife. It's because of its sensibilities. But it's true. You and I have a similar background. I come from the production world. Sold a bunch of TV shows, did some movies. Before I moved back here, I still have to go to LA. A few times a year. But I do military tours. Well, like you were saying, some of the entertainment stuff I've booked. It was a glorified hobby and just probably greatest hobby I had for about 4 or 5 years, booking famous like national anthem singers, like celebrity people to do national anthems at like NFL, playoff games, or like bands like Cheap Trick, like doing halftime shows, also for NASCAR and stuff like that. And then I started doing goodwill tours for the USO and Armed Forces Entertainment. And just before the pandemic, same thing. They're like, hey, we need to kind of have a broader range. So when we do these basketball tours with WNBA, we want to do audience warm up and more like, MC, more hosting. So I got thrust into the role of being like a Bob Hope type thing. And that kind of, because Joe and I, went out and did stand up in LA in like the mid 90s, and then haven't done it since then. And then I was thrusted back into it just before the pandemic. So that's how I fell into it. And then coming out of the pandemic, when I started going to open mics, I'd be really curious to find out how awful some of the experiences you had based on the fact that I couldn't find any open mic places. And, my wife saw a show at Ralph's in Worcester, and there was a flyer there, and this is September. So I started going out there. Then I found a couple other open mics there. Then I found out there's one right down the street at the Safe on Tuesday. But the ones in Worcester, for the first 3-4 months, I was primarily going out there once or twice a week. 95% male, mostly mid-20s to early 30s, absolutely disgusting, punching down, homophobic, misogynistic.
But at least racially diverse, right?
Oh, well, there was some white guys, and then there were some really white guys. And there was one
White guys with sunburns.
there was white guys with beards and hats. Some
by the way, you're on a podcast with two white guys. We can't escape this.
It's and there was one podcast. There was one open mic I didn't love to go to, but there was one at like 7 and then one at like 8:30 across town. So as you know, it'd be great if you could hit 2 in one night, especially with an hour each drive. I just had to stop going a couple months ago because I just couldn't take the misogyny. And there's no, seriously, there was one open mic where, let's say I went 10 times over the course of like 3 months. I saw 2 or 3 women go up, and the guy who ran it would jokingly say, well, we're not going to see her again. Nobody has come back a second time. No woman. And it's like it was a badge of honor. And then one time he had one really awful punching down on Down syndrome kids, which 2023, I'm sure that will work in other rooms other than that shithole little bar in an industrial part of Worcester. But he had this 5-minute routine that all built to the arc of women who are 50 shouldn't color their hair because if your body doesn't make eggs anymore, your head shouldn't look like an Easter one. And got a huge laugh from the 6 or 7 Proud Boys in the room. And it's like, I'm not one of these social justice warriors where I'm going to get up and like fight for the honor of women who aren't in the room. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change his mindset. That said, I have a wife who's 50 who's 1 week her hair is purple and the next week it's silver and the week after that it's red and black. And she last year saved for 2 years and went to 9 cities, 4 countries to see Duran Duran play 12 shows. I don't know a cooler person. And I'm thinking,
so cool.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, dude, like, and my wife has a few single mom friends who are just the best women I know, just wonderful. And I'm like, oh my God, like these guys get up and complain they can't find anybody to go out with. It's like, yes, because you're disgusting. Like, there's some great women out there, but you are this disgusting troll who thinks that's funny. And
to be fair, you did go on incel night.
Yeah,
so,
no, I did. Look, it was a fundraiser for the Proud Boys who got arrested January 6th. I should have known that going in, that what I was going to deal with.
There was a Kyle Rittenhouse tip jar at the front. Were you not tipped off? But
I see you, and I want to get to the show I saw you at last night, and I do. I'm like, how? First of all, how do these guys think outside of this room? And then, you follow them on Instagram and each one has a different big show in Worcester every month where they're putting out a YouTube special about just the awfulest stuff. I'm like thinking, why are you doing this? You guys aren't going anywhere. But then, I find other open mics and somebody gave me the heads up going out. It's like, you and I live in Lowell, Jenni, and we are 45 minutes from everywhere. We can go to Boston to do open mics. We can go to Worcester to do open mics, Rhode Island, Providence and Manchester. There's open mics everywhere. But the more I found, it's like, yeah, you should just go to the Boston open mics because it tends. There's a couple in Worcester, Manchester that are okay. But I think the further you get away from a big city like Boston, the more awfulness you get. And so how was your experience as a woman going to these awful mics been? I mean, were they as bad as I can imagine?
They're all awful, by the way. We just want to put it out there.
Yeah. They're all awful. And I'll just say this, that I I think it was absolutely necessary. Like, I mean, I don't think that they necessarily have to be as awful as they are, but I feel as though, there's a certain amount of sweat and tears that are required. I don't know about blood. I mean, although there was a few times that I almost got into fights. So I'll tell you about that. But
Please.
Please do. I'm writing
yeah.
that down so we don't skip that. Fights. I'm putting that on my. We will circle back.
Yeah, so I have had some pretty intense experiences for sure. In the beginning, I was really nervous about going to open mics by myself, but I also know that, given my experience when I worked in rock and roll, some of these things you just have to figure out how to get the guts to do it by yourself. And plus, like, your like comedy friends are just going to get sick of like going to open mics with you, and you exhaust your friends that want to maybe come and support you. You bring them, you drag your real like non-comedy friends to too many open mics, and they're very quickly unavailable to go to your shows because they're like, oh my God, is it always like a shitty open mic? But yeah, your story about Worcester is sort of surprising to me, only because I've only had okay experiences in Worcester. So I wasn't going to that open mic, although I've had very similar experiences. I think it's pretty common to, if you present female, that you are a weirdo in the room for sure. You are of the minority, and if you're not, the whitest of the white or sunburnt white, then you are even further a minority in the New England open mics for sure. One of the fights I actually almost got into was at a Boston mic. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I guess when you look back on like different experiences in your life, and it sounds like, Jacques, like this is like what you're realizing with like your past experiences too, is like everything kind of prepares you for what's coming next. And as I started going to more of these mics, it reminded me of being like a roadie very early on, and like being a female and rock and roll, like nobody thinks that you're going to be strong enough to flip like a motor case up into a tractor trailer, or that you would understand how to back up a truck. This was before there were cameras on the backs of all the trucks, things like that. So I feel like that experience was really beneficial in preparing me for like kind of having a thick skin for the most part. But I think all comedians are sensitive people, whether or not they'll admit it. I think that's why, if you're a good writer, you're paying attention and you're observing the way people react, because you will, just be interested in that. And so I actually went to Jacques Cabaret. I'm gonna get in trouble for this. And that's like a famous mic. And I'd only been at it a few months, and some of my like local comic friends that have been doing it way longer than me drove down from Maine and New Hampshire to meet me there, because I was like, I'm nervous about doing this mic, and we were going to try and hit multiple mics that night. And every mic kind of has its own culture too. And so if you aren't a regular, so if you aren't a regular, you don't know what the unwritten rules of that mic are, you can run a chance of pissing a whole group of people off. And my understanding of the culture at that time was like, if you go to a mic, you should try and support the venue, because there's a bartender somewhere nearby that's listening to 30 shitty comics, or 30 comics or 25 comics that are shit, and 5 that are good work out their shit. And so you need, you need to tip those guys. You need to buy food there. Like, don't run away. So anyways, so I went to Jacques. I didn't know at Jacques that you weren't supposed to write other people's names down, but finding parking there is a nightmare. We were like running late, which was 2 hours early to this mic because it's got a reputation. And so I wrote my name down and their names down, and I stayed there the whole time. And I watched other comics come in and write their names down and take off, and write their names down and take off. And I'm sitting next to the list, and these other comics start talking shit about me. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like, why are people being mean? So I once there's confrontation, like I want to try and solve it, you know, and I want to be kind to people, but it just got so ugly that I was like, oh my God, this is actually happening right now. And I like 15 of these comics were so upset that I signed up 2 other people that were parking their car. And I was like, does anybody want to like explain to me what I did wrong? Or do we just want to be crappy? So it became this theme of the night. And the hosts were talking trash about how somebody broke the rules. Mind you, nobody ever explained the rules to me. So when I got up on stage, my whole 5 minutes was talking about experience. And then afterwards, like 4 comics came up to me and were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry you got picked on. I'm like, you were some of the people talking trash about me. And one of them was like, yeah, I signed up like 5 other people. And I was like, okay, then why did I get in trouble? And they're like, because you didn't try to hide your unvirtuous behavior. And I was like, oh my God, this is like not worth the drive and the parking.
Right.
You guys,
and that's an hour. That's an hour drive from Lowell. It's parking in Boston on a Sunday night, which, you know, right. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was going out to Worcester, because Worcester's free parking. In Boston, it's like, I don't want to pay $20 for parking. No, it's really funny, and then if you go to you go to Jacques in Boston, and then you either run over to do the one in Watertown, Donahue's in Midway. If you time it, you can hit Jacques, Donahue's, and then Midway Cafe.
Donahue, Midway.
And what's hysterical is you will have a joke that will kill at one of the 3 and die at the other 2, you know what I mean, or work it. But like you said, the subculture at each of those mics completely different, and there might be a third of the same people at each of these mics. But you're right, because there are some, when I first went to an open mic, and I'm one of these, you know, I have a production background, I'm a producer, so I get there early and yell at everybody for showing up late. You know, I'm if you're not there early, you're late kind of guy. So the list goes out at 6:30. I'm sitting there by 6. And I remember one of the open mics, a guy comes in, he puts a list down, the guy who ran it, and he wrote names for spots 5 through 10. And I'm like, dude, at this point, I didn't want to go up too early. I want to see what the vibe of the room is. But now I'm obligated to sit here for, you know, 10 people times 6 minutes. Just be, you know, why am I? But from room to room, you find out these unwritten rules here, or if you're friends with the person who runs a mic, you can't do it because they don't know you, so you're a nobody piece of shit. But if the friend comes in and does the exact same thing, oh, that's totally cool. And I was talking to Joe, and I have another really good friend who lives in Austin, who I kind of call when I need to be talked in off the ledge. And Joe knows me, and this guy knows me at the tail end of my different life when I solve problems a different way. I was a minor league hockey goon, and I did MMA before they called it MMA, and I used to like to start bar fights and stuff like that. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm 50 and trying to be a comic. But a few weeks ago, there was somebody who just couldn't stop with the homophobia, because I generally very often wear a Hello Kitty t-shirt. Just couldn't stop, and it's like, and I said, hey, that's great. Why don't we, you know, when you get off stage, we'll continue this talk outside in the alley. And a lot of people were like, ooh. And then and I felt bad. I'm like, what are you doing? And then over the next few weeks, different people came up to me. It's like, oh yeah, he got into a fight with this guy here a few months ago. And it turns out, like, you know, I'm like, okay. So, you know, so I've almost gotten fights, but I don't want to do that. But yeah, you find that there's some places that get, you know, take things so serious. But I was telling Joe the other day, the Instagram post, Jenni, that I put out the other day that I got the most response for ever. I just simply put out a post that said, if you sign up for an open mic and hang outside till it's your turn to go on, and then you hand the mic back to the host as you make your way for the exit, you're a douchebag. And no, it's plain and simple. And I said, and, you know, don't be a cheap bastard. Spend something at these venues. Whether you get a water, if you don't drink a beer, order some chips, do something. Because like you said, there's a poor fucking bartender who has to sit there for 3 hours, and in that 3 hours might, like you said, see 4 good comics who aren't bringing their A stuff because they're at this open mic working out their new shit. But I got so much a response, and there were some people who liked it. I'm like, dude, I'm talking about you. Like, I've seen you walk into the safe, sign up, and stand outside for an hour smoking. The guy comes and gets you before you go on, and then you either leave or you go back outside. It's like,
well, that's why he liked the post, because he felt seen.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
man.
At least pretend to be supportive. So that's my thing. Look, I would like to go out more, but I'm married. I got 2 kids. I actually like spending time with them. I go to all my kids' activities. So sometimes, but if I go to a mic and I'm 5th, I'm going to watch at least 4 or 5 people after me. I'm going to watch 3 of, if I go on first, I'll stay for 6, 7 people. If I go on third, whatever it is, I make a real effort to watch 4 or 5 people on either side of me doing my shitty stuff. And it'd be nice if other people kind of, did that, but it's awful, which is why I always ask, why do you do this? Like it's, book shows are so much different now. Sometimes they're different. I want to talk about last night's show. I saw you last night at a place called Concept 6 in Lowell. It is the old Uncharted, which is a place my band used to play, a few years back, and then, but it had the same kind of vibe where it's art, where it's half art gallery, now it's a half. And I did an open mic there a couple weeks ago, and it was okay, but it was so loud, and so there's this great show last night. It was a female only thing. Katie Coughlin, who I see on a regular basis at the Safe, is one of the funniest people I get to see on Tuesdays. Like, if I see 20 comics on Tuesdays, she is one of the funniest. She had a routine, a few weeks ago about an incident at a Barnes and Noble. I don't know if you caught it last night, that every time I will drive past a Barnes and Noble the rest of my life, I will think of Katie's routine. There's another comedian who went up last night, I think just before you, Xtina, and she is a regular over at the Safe. And they're really great. But last night, packed, which is fantastic. Female only show, absolutely packed. But by the time you got up there, it was absolutely packed, but you could barely hear you. Like, you could barely hear you. And kudos to you, because you made 2 huge efforts to politely say, shut the fuck up. She did this thing where there was one girl who you could hear over the din of the entire club. And you, Jenni, you had everybody be quiet to see how long it took her to realize she's at the other side of the club at the bar. And Jenni,
was there a second microphone, by the way, like hooked up?
funny you ask. No, she was drowning out Jenni from the stage, and she had no mic. But you got everybody to be quiet, and she kept talking. And then, even as everybody kind of turns to her, it was like, "Oh, am I being rude?" So, anyways, like I was saying. And you made 2 attempts, because I stood right in the middle. It was great. There was a bunch of friends that I see, and the Lowell group, and I've seen it. You Lowell shows that I've seen around. It was nice that all these people who came out to support Katie, Christina, and you, and the other people, we're actively trying to listen. But how tough was that from the stage for you?
Well, I mean, we're production nerds, so I just want to preface this with saying that, like, I think Katie pulled together like a great crowd. I love that venue. Lowell is a city, but it's also very much like a village suburb of Boston. And the funny small world kind of experience is that, like, Katie's mom, I think she introed me this way last night too, which was really funny. Katie's mom was my physical therapist when I got into a really nasty car accident like 10 years ago.
That is how she introed you, yes.
Yeah, which is wild, you know, and I know her from comedy, but it was funny because the first time we saw each other at comedy, she was like, Jen? And I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, I've been to your yoga class and you're funny in yoga class. So, but it's just, it's funny, small world. But, you know, I think that the venue's fantastic. And I think Katie did a really great job putting that show together. But I think there was a few elements that were working against us last night. You know, I think when you've got color changing lights on and the person's backlit on stage, it makes people not want to pay attention to what's happening on the stage. Right.
No, if you were a jazz flutist, that was the perfect lighting for that venue. It made for some great Instagram photos. I saw the way the shadow on the wall, but yeah, it didn't have the spotlight. Hey, the funny's over here, kind of vibe.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost like you're kind of the background elevator music for the rest of the bar. It's just like it's weird when they don't. When you're inviting people to perform in front of the audience, but the focus isn't on the performer. It's like, no, the focus is on the atmosphere and the hang, and, you know, let people talk to each other while this other person with the microphone is struggling to get their words across the crowd.
You know,
Totally, Joe.
having and then to make the announcement, oh, the kitchen's open, they're going to start serving food. Now people are giving food orders, and there's no divider. It's just this one big group, and it's great for certain things. When I went there a few weeks ago to do an open mic, I think I didn't call Guinness Book of World Record, but I think I went up to do an open mic the night that Concept 6 broke the record for most 30-plus-year-old white rappers. Which am I wrong, or is Lowell the epicenter of 30-plus-year-old guys who like, yeah, I still got a few years to get into the rap game, yo. And it's like, and some of them have segued into spoken word, and some of them have segued into comedy. But that night it was a lot of Eminem light.
It's like the Asylum Pictures version of 8 Mile. You know,
Asylum Picture.
We got the low budget filming happening in Lowell.
Pretty much.
Deep in the canals.
Yeah, the Sharknado of.
And it's funny
comedy.
Because you know. And I'm so glad I'm talking to you, because you were also on the bill. Since Greg has come back with Mondo Comedy, I think Joe's missed one show, and I think Joe might have missed a couple. I missed one because I was traveling. But those are usually great. And Greg, who is just a sweetheart. Like Greg Bogus is way too nice to be in comedy. You know, he's a sweetheart. He called me in like December, and he's like, "Hey, you coming tonight?" I'm like, "I'm actually, I'm going to go do 2 open mics." He goes, "No, just come here and do it." And that was December. I'm like, "Okay, great." I went up. I messed up and did well enough where Greg's like, "Hey, why don't you come back and do 10, 12 minutes in a couple months?" And that's the night that you and I were on the same bill. And Joe was there, and it's funny because I was saying, like, the whole ride home and the next day, it's like, you know what? Bad comics blame a bad crowd. But that night, wow. Like, your stuff was, there's a kid named Nick Hahn, who I see on a regular basis, who I think you've done other book shows with, I've seen. Just a really, really funny guy. It's interesting because you really, really like trudged ahead on a night that it was people were seeing how hard they could work to not laugh.
And by the way, Jacques, I will blame the comic on this one, because you brought half that crowd.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I don't let any of my friends go to anything. Like, my wife has only seen me do twice, and the 7 months, 100 times I've gone out, just because I can't. It's just too awful. Like, I just would not subject my friends to any of that, except Joe. I make Joe go to things, but are we really friends? But yeah, I mean, how do you deal when when you're going out there and you're just getting wet paint or a loud crowd? Like, what's going through your mind that keeps you focused and to just keep trudging ahead?
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with you. I guess I felt like I did poorly that night. Poor Greg. Like, I'm like, Greg, I got to send you like video of me crushing at other locations because I feel cursed in that room. I think it's maybe because I saw that theater get built. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too comfortable there. I don't know what it is. It's like cursed for me. But
I think you have something.
yeah.
You're right on the venue, because comics have commented on it that the seats are way too comfortable for a comedy vibe, because you sit down, there are these big cushy like theater, like the movie theaters type seats, and I mean do they recline? Because they feel like they
feel like they recline. No.
No.
And so I've become friends with the guy Jim who owns Mill over the last few years. Like, I have sat with him. I do a lot of consulting. I help a lot of businesses turn corners and figure out things and how to connect the dots sometimes. And I've worked with him. I have sat with him and written complete business proposals for him a few times. And like, dude, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Or why don't you think about this? And he has that gorgeous space right upstairs, right next to your studio. And last year, my two sons, they're in middle school, are in this amazing program called Afternoon in the Arts, where they ship all the kids from the different junior highs to the high school twice a week. And it's free theater, it's free dance, it's free, like, they have access to a kiln, they have orchestra. And I said, let's do a fundraiser. So Joe and I, as you can see Joe's background, we're video game nerds, reached out to a company called Boom Boom Games to do a pop-up store. And I think they brought like 20, 25 different video game systems. The room is done upstairs. It's one of the first things that Jim did up there. Joe and I brought a good half dozen of our own, like, first generation Atari, Nintendo. We had and set up all these chairs. And so the drama kids put on scenes from a couple plays, and the theater, the orchestra played, the dance kids played. This pop-up store, they showed up the day before. When people showed up, Jenni, they thought that they had rented the space, that this is a full-time store. You would not have in a million years thought that this was a pop-up. And we had about 250, 300 people come in that gorgeous space upstairs. Jim calls me 3 hours before and says, we don't have anybody open the kitchen tonight. There's not going to be any food. And I'm like, dude, the whole reason we're doing this is to, when I wrote the proposal, I'm like, look, I will find a way not to get the same people to come back to Mill Number 5 who know you. Let me help find a way to get people who've never come through your door in, and find ways to keep them. I ended up running to BJ's, spent like $300, bought all this food and water. And I said to my kids, I'm like, they were like 11 and 14 at the time. I'm like, this is how much I spent. When you guys get off the stage, you guys run a concession stand. Keep whatever you make after this. But there was also a fundraiser. So for this out, and so the fundraiser made like $500-600. My kids made a couple $100, and it's like, and then my wife, who's friends with the people who have the art store next to you, the art gallery next to you,
yeah.
They put my wife on Facebook because she was the first person to buy a cloud painting, like when that cloud exhibition started. She has the Jim forgot to tell you and them, oh, by the way, there's going to be
basically he's like, yeah, you can do your fundraiser, but you'll do it on a night where nobody's there, or we'll lock up the building. And if you want to get in, here's the key, because nobody else is going to be there. So it was almost like he was doing you a favor of letting you put this thing on.
And then, because we're friends with the guy at the record store and pop culture and all these people, and my wife's friends with the people with the photo gallery, and they're like, dude, we had no idea this was going on.
Oh my God.
Tonight. And that's where the comedy show should be, upstairs. and where the lighting is going to be different, where you're not too relaxed. The Luna is gorgeous, and it is the best place in the world to watch Citizen Kane. Hands down, if you want to watch a retro movie, go to the Luna and just enjoy. If you want to see a comedy show, dude, move it up. Plus, you can get more people up there. I think occupancy is 150 in that room.
Does the elevator work every time it goes up that high? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that elevator can make that high of a trip all the time.
Oh man, I've got so many stories about what you guys just talked about, but I have one story in particular. But yeah, so it is right next to my studio. But one story in particular, there's a certain charm and a certain like level of courage that's required to own a business in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Yes, agreed.
And in 2022, my business got broken into 3 times. And the mill was broken into 3 times in 1 week.
Wow.
Christmas week.
Good for those robbers to actually be able to find the building, because sometimes it's hard to, like, when I go to the show, I'm like, it's dark out. Like, can you put a light bulb outside maybe to like maybe show people where to enter the building? But yeah, I'm sorry, go on. Yeah, that's awful though.
Yeah, no, I used to have a joke that I was writing about owning a business inside of downtown Lowell, where like I couldn't tell if I was just hallucinating and I just wandered into an abandoned building and who knows, asbestos. But so during one of these break-ins, so Dave Perry, who owns Vinyl Destination downstairs, the record shop, his business got broken into in one of these incidences in December, and my studio got broken into again, and he came upstairs and the cops were like dusting for prints because the like guy left his weapons behind in the yoga studio. And so I'm sitting there on the floor outside, like next to all the broken glass, and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening again. I must really love this city to stay here.
Right.
And Dave comes up to me, he's like, because we've known each other since before the mill even opened. Like, we were one of the first few like businesses that went in there. And he's like, Jen, are you doing comedy? I'm like, Dave, right now the detectives are trying to talk to me. He's like, Jen, you're doing comedy. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, did I see that you were doing shows with Steve Sweeney? And I was like, yeah, I have become friendly with him, and he's been a lovely mentor, and
Legend.
and
legend. Yeah, absolute legend.
And, yeah, I feel really lucky because he will like text me, just like, his nickname for me is motherfucker. So,
okay.
So he just, we have a very funny friendship because he's also like really into meditation and breath work. And so it's just funny. It's like this weird hybrid of like mindful assholery in the comedy world. But so Dave Perry, that owns the record shop, is like asking me all these questions. I'm like, Dave, yeah, I'll like send you like the places that I'm performing, and I'll let you know if I'm going to be with Sweeney one of these dates, blah blah blah. So Sweeney was just coming back from Vegas, and it dawned on me after the like the detectives left, and I was like realizing, oh my God, this is the first time that Dave's been broken into, and I'm a veteran now. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go on Cameo and see if Sweeney has a Cameo account. I'm like, he's like, he can't even text, you know what I mean? So I'm like, I doubt he has a Cameo. He has a Cameo, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to give Cameo a cut of this because we're like close enough friends that I could just call him or text him and be like, hey, can you make one for me? Like, you must know how if you're on Cameo. But I was like, can you like make something for my friend Dave? He's a huge fan of yours. And I think it would really lift his spirits if you were like, hey, sorry that you got broken into, yada, yada. And so Sweeney, he's so funny. He's like, yeah, my phone's malfunctioning. I'm like, okay. And then he sends another text and he's like, yeah, my video's not working. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you know what, just give me his phone number. So he calls Dave, right?
Oh.
And I'm like, and I text Dave and I'm like, Dave, and this is like the next day after like we got broken into, and I was like, Dave, I've got an emergency, you know, because he doesn't think it has anything to do with comedy. I'm like, I need you to answer the phone. It's going to be coming from a number that you don't know. And then like an hour later, I just get this message from him that he's like, you're incredible. I can't believe that Steve Sweeney just called me and talked my ear off about Van Morrison, and like, you like made my day. So it was just so cool to like see that intersection of worlds, and like, I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
That kind of small world.
That is wonderful for you to do. I mean, literally, I gotta ask. Look, I've broken into so many places. Joe and I dabble on crime on the side. What are we stealing at a yoga studio?
Crossed my mind the first thing. I was like, first of all, he left his weapons in the yoga studio, which is the most ironic juxtaposition of all time.
I will say, over the pandemic, we had a hell of a time at one point. You could not find mats. Like my wife and I and our 15-year-old like has this thing called EDS, and the rheumatologist is like, oh, try yoga. And we signed up for this thing online. Couldn't find yoga mats. So maybe I mean, are yoga mats still in that much? Are they stealing karma? What do you get? Because I'm guessing you don't have a big cash register. I'm guessing all your transactions are Venmo or monthly dues or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell did they think they were going to get? And what did they get?
Total enlightenment.
Well, I mean, it was really. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Which is nice.
It was crazy. Like, I personally, I'm honored that people think we make enough money that you could actually steal any from us. Like,
Yes,
we're talking about yoga here, you guys.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, we thought this was yogurt. I'm sorry. We thought this had more of a. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we had a really small cash drawer, you know. I mean, it's super sad because we give away probably more than we should, and it's, you know, we donate to all the like local community organizations, like all these things, and so it's ironic, you know, that somebody was struggling so bad that they broke into a yoga studio. Like,
no,
yeah, they just got a little bit of cash, coins, you know.
So when I was out in LA 10 years before I met my current victim, my current wife, and when she moved out, we lived right in Venice, and a work friend came over or was running to the house to pick something up, and he's like, "Oh, let me have your keys." I'm like, "Oh no, just go in." And they were stunned, like, "Wait a minute, you like the face that Joe's making," and I'm like, "Dude, two things. A, I don't fucking own anything. Like literally, you know, we have, and you don't know this when you're outside, but we had a pit bull that was the sweetest, could lick you to death at the drop of a hat, but he was a barker. So it's like most of people are going to be scared off of that. Secondly, and I've said this to so many people, like, you know, we had, Joe and I just moved an old TV to his game room the other day that was 150 pounds. We had one of those 150-pound big TVs. Good luck getting it out of there. And it was a piece of shit anyways. And I used to tell my wife that it's like the cost of replacing a door and a door frame that gets kicked in is so much more money than anything we have in this apartment, because we were very bohemian. Like we traveled a lot. We didn't, you know, we weren't ever home, and all our furniture was secondhand, you know, it was beach furniture and stuff like that. And even now, we live on the outskirts of Lowell. My wife sometimes is like, "You lock the door?" I'm like, "No, I've never locked the door. We got a ring alarm. Right now we got 10 dogs at the house." It's like, and if you want to come in and take something, it's like that would help me, because, you know, there's so much clutter here. You know, we would call the cops, and the cops would come over. It's like, "Oh, they ransacked this place." It's like, no, that's just how we live. So at a yoga studio, as soon as you said that, I'm like, but I know, like, because Jim had told me, you know, he had 3 overdoses in 1 year in the bathrooms downstairs, and that's why he put those locks on, those coded locks. And it's such a tough thing. Look, that's the fabric of the neighborhood, and it's, you want things to get better without them being gentrified, but, with the courthouse there and the new parking lot, maybe a couple, like Joe said, maybe a couple more street lights, it won't be as bad. But yeah, right where you are, there's going to be those things, but how do they even get upstairs? Because does the elevator work? The elevator barely works on a Saturday morning when they're having a bazaar. How did they get up to the fifth floor after hours? Excuse me, after hours. How did they get up to the fifth floor?
I mean, I've been petitioning for a climbing school to join the mill so we can just get into harnesses and crawl up the outside of the building.
Just put a rock wall outside the window, just make it anything to make it easier.
So getting back to comedy. So
yeah.
Where are you now, and where do you think do you have a 1-year, 5-year plan? I mean, is this a glorified hobby? Is this a career path? Is this something to fill in the time in between, other adventures? Where does comedy, rank or fit into your world, and where are you going with this?
Yeah.
Not to sound like your mom. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. What's the matter with you?
Why don't you get married and just have some children, for God's sakes?
Why don't you get a real business that people can break into?
Yeah. Oh my God. I know. I feel like I'm always choosing like the hardest possible path. Like I had no intention of opening a yoga studio, you know what I mean? And I didn't even know that I was going to like teaching yoga. And when, the opportunity came up to open, I was like, well, if this sucks and the business, fails, I'll just go back to entertainment, right? That was always I'll just go back to entertainment if this fails miserably. And then COVID happened, and I was like, well, there's no entertainment to return to. So, I feel like personally, and I think for a lot of comics, like I think that people are trying to integrate comedy all the time in their lives because they see what an effect it can have on others, making other people like forget their struggles for like even a millisecond. If you can get them to laugh at a poop joke, like you've improved somebody's life for like 5 seconds. And like this is sort of like a weird hippie response, but like I just feel like people are struggling, and suffering. And with my recent foray into comedy, like I've met a lot of comics that have asked me about like mechanisms that can help them get happier personally, because I think a lot of us struggle with like depression and anxiety, and we're sensitive people, like I said earlier. And so I hope that if I keep taking the advice of my elders, even though I'm older than some of them, elders in comedy, veterans in comedy, that I'll continue to get opportunities to share the stage with amazing people like you guys. And I hope that it can turn into something, because I'm booking out a lot now at this point, and I feel really lucky to be doing that. And I just want to keep getting better at it so that I can continue to help people feel better. Because like with yoga, there's a certain cap to that. Myself, I never would have admitted to my friends that worked in rock and roll that I was doing yoga. Like for years, I was a closeted yogi. Like I was like, I'm not into this hippie shit. Like I don't want to do that. Like that's for the weirdos. But I know that a lot of people are afraid of those practices, and they might also not have mobility, or they might not have access, but some people can afford like $10 on a Saturday night to go and laugh for a bit. And if I can help people feel better, I want to do that. And I've spent a lot of time in this now, and I just want to keep doing that. And so I'm really hopeful that I can continue to make people laugh and then hopefully get rebooked. And I don't know. For me personally, this last year has been so hard. Like I lost my mom and my brother this last year. My business got broken into 3 times. Thank you. And so I'm just like, you know what? Like, life is too short to be worrying how much of an idiot I'm going to look like. I'm going to look like an idiot and I'm going to make people laugh. And then our time is going to be up. And like, we might as well just try and make each other feel joy for like a millisecond, you know, for the blip of time that we're on planet Earth. So
That's the motto of our
that's my
podcast.
weirdo.
We don't care that we look like idiots. We don't. We want to make. You know, how about this? I think that maybe there should be some sort of like confluence between like the comedy world and the tragedy that's happening at Mill Number 5. Maybe we can do a comedy show with the guys who break into the comedy, like, you know, like heal
A
those
roast?
people. Yeah, exactly. Like invite them. Like, yeah, a big invitation. Everybody who broke into Mill Number 5, just come down for one night and, you know, feel a little bit better. Maybe that'll set them on the right path.
Yeah, no, it,
Maybe
you know,
we can get let's get Jacques to go to Worcester and round up all those nice gentlemen he met in Worcester,
God.
and they can come.
Bring some tiki torches, and, you know,
Yeah.
maybe
you know,
I can march from.
I've recently seen a couple of those guys at the better ones. Like if there's a group of, like, look, there's an open mic at Ralph's on Tuesday night run by this guy Sean Connolly, Irish McIrishin. That's great. And that's a really well run mic. Generally speaking, I think, you know, he's a respected guy. It's a respected place. I think that's okay. But yeah, the other awful ones, like I said, there's maybe out of those 20 guys, there's 2 or 3 who are decent human beings and really funny. And I've recently seen them in Boston and stuff like that. So good on them. But enough of that. Where can people follow you on social media? What shows do you have coming up? So this will drop on Monday. So what do you have like the next few weeks and next month booked? And where can people follow you on the socials?
Yeah, well, you know, actually, I have a question for you guys about that, because it's something that has been really kind of like curious for me about other comics. Like, I don't know about like merging my lives of like comic, DJ, yoga teacher, you know, because to some people I'm like a spiritual mentor to them, which sounds super fucking arrogant. And there's just, you know, I have conversations with people about life, and then they're like, but wait, like last night was a weird like confluence of that, of like people showing up and being like, that's my yoga teacher talking about farts, and telling people to shut the fuck up, you know?
Yeah, it's like seeing your high school, you know, history teacher.
There was,
like,
Joe, there was a big moment. There was a big moment last night where one comic, mid-20s, late 20s, recognized her high school English teacher was there, and everybody ended up stopping and giving a big round of applause. And because there's so many Lowell born and raised there was at least a dozen, 10 people who had that woman as an English teacher like 5 to 10 years ago. So it was it was interesting.
Yeah. So Jacques, maybe you can answer Jen's question. How do you separate your personal, professional life from your outward, your comedy persona? Like, how do you keep the two distinct?
Well, it's funny you asked, Joe. No, I don't. Like, I have it's all one big thing for me. I'm this old fuck who still records with his band, and his band being him and one other guy since 1989, and we have a song dropping next week all about our favorite person in the world, Tucker Carlson. And my favorite person in the world, I mean, maybe, it's kind of tough because it's anyways, biggest piece of shit on the human planet. But it's like I've done shows where it's like in between sets, like done it, and I know I just put it all out there. It's like this is who I am, and now it's at the point where my son is 15, and 4 times over like the last month he's come and done open mics with me. So even my parenting, has, and it's great because my wife and Joe are 2 of the funniest people. Like, I know completely different sides of like, the thought process on funny. And if they both like something or both hate something, so it's just part of, who and what I am. It's like, I can't pull off the Bruce Wayne Batman thing. You know what I mean?
Jen, do you have a social media? Like, do you have a social account set up, or do you have like a thing where you post, funny musings or where you're going to be?
Yeah, yes, I do. So all of mine is into one entity. On Instagram, I'm JenniMillions, JenniMillions, all one word. And yeah, so it's all of me. It's, I haven't necessarily been a traditional yoga teacher. I play music that's not traditionally played during yoga, and I make jokes, and I post weird memes occasionally. But yeah, all of my comedy and yoga information is there. JenniMillions, and then I have like a crappy TikTok under the same name. Like I have like 4 posts maybe on TikTok. I don't really know how to use TikTok, so yeah. And I've got
talking
like
to us, all TikTok is crappy. It doesn't really. I can't tell the difference. It's all
And then if you put some great thing on TikTok, is it part? Does the Chinese government then intellectually own it? And they can. No, I think it's great. Look, if I was a yoga guy, I would love if my yoga teacher was funny, and I would love if my comedians were well-rounded people. I think it's fantastic. Like I said, we met a couple months ago at the same, working the same thing for Greg Bogus, and it was fantastic. And it was great to talk to you. I've seen you around the mill because we were there all the time for, I cannot tell you how much art and jewelry my wife has bought there in the last couple. I'm dead serious. On Black Friday.
How much I've stolen.
How much Joe stole. Did you get your tools back? Because I know last time, Joe, that you left some of the tools there. No, it's like I was. Your record company friend put me on Facebook because I was the first one in the store on Black Friday to buy. The wife was, I forget where the hell she was in Chicago for work on Black Friday, but Duran Duran released a very limited, and Dave had one copy of it coming in. So I bought that. So we're at Mill all the time. I've seen you around. It's been great seeing you a couple times. Last night you were absolutely funny as hell. I think that Katie put on a fantastic show, and it was great seeing some of my favorite comics. I mean, the laugh to dick joke ratio was about a third of what it normally is, because at these Proud Boy things, it's like everybody has to let you know how fantastic the dick is. It's like, dude, you're white. It's not. Let's let's be honest, which is what stand-up comedy is all about. But no, I want to see more shows. I want Katie to put on more shows. And I would like to come see you at more shows that Katie puts on with Sixtina, and maybe at a place where there's a spotlight and two speakers and less, talky, loud assholes at the bar ordering food, because your comedy needs to be heard. So you're fantastic, and I'm excited to see over like the next 6 months or year, like if you have to face the dilemma of like somebody wants me to open for them on a road, or cruise ships want me to go out once a month and stuff like that. That'd be a good dilemma to have.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I feel so grateful to, Greg and the other bookers that like have been giving me, these opportunities to open for some amazing people. Like tonight, I'm opening for, who am I opening for? I'm opening for Harrison Stebbins. He was actually the first show that I got like a tiny guest spot on about a year ago. So it's really cool to be back with him, Jody Sloan, and Dave Decker. But next, I'm doing some gigs up in Peabody. I don't know if you've been to the F355 Lounge with Flay Hive. He does Wicked Funny in North Andover at China Blossom.
Okay, yep, I've seen this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have not gone, but I have seen all this stuff on Instagram from them. So I try to follow all those, guys. And like you said, you've already mentioned some of my favorite people like Steve Bork and stuff like that. The next time you're performing with Steve, I will definitely go, because I like to see two people I really know at once, because I very rarely can get out. So it's great when I can see as many. Like, that's why last night was great. I normally, Fridays and Saturdays are the 2 days that I generally don't do stuff, because, like I said, the whole Mary thing, but there was just so many comics that I really liked that Katie had on that bill last night that I was like, yes, and plus it was Lowell, so it's like I could drive the 10
Yeah.
minutes away and pay my $15 to see like 4 or 5 people that I really like seeing perform. So that's why last night was really great, and you were awesome. We will let you go do whatever it is a person with several businesses and careers, growing exponentially on a Saturday. And Joe, you got any last thoughts? Oh, yeah.
What do I have a thought? I don't know. No, it was nice meeting you, Jen. And it was great talking to you. And I wish you the best of luck in the next, coming months and years of comedy. I'm sure it's only going to get better because if things can only get better.
It can only
right?
get better.
Yeah, it can only get better. By the way, do you meditate before you go up? Like, do you have like a ritual where you kind of, clear your head and kind of center yourself before you go up, or is it just,
Yeah, definitely I do. And I picked this up from another comic that was really like very encouraging. And he said, he's like, you got to use your yoga tools, and you just got to remember that like you've got some funny stuff in your head and you're sharing it with a room full of your friends, even if sometimes they're drunk and assholes and they talk too much. Like, you gotta view them like your friends. And I was like, oh my God, this is just like yoga. So I do the same process when I teach, of just trying to like stay present.
No, that's I have a mantra as I'm going up. I tell myself, everybody here is beneath you, and they're stupid, and they're lucky that you even fucking would look in their direction, because these pieces of shit don't deserve half of what you're about to give them. The fuck, and then the other 90% of my brain says, "Shut up, moron! You should kill yourself now." And then I cry a little.
That's the
It sounds
hockey
like you
player
need
in
some
you. The hockey player in you.
It sounds like you need some yoga and meditation in your life, brother. I mean, it's something to break up all the voices.
Yeah, I don't need to drink to have a good time. I need to drink to silence the voices in my head. Jenni, thank you so much for jumping on. We will. Joe and I will come and see you as much as we can over the next year, and you are awesome.
Thank you guys so much. It was so awesome to be on this. I'm honored. Thank you.
And now, before we let you go, what I would love, because what we normally do when we have a comedian on after the show intro and the last thing, if you could send me like a 30-second clip, like an MP3 of something, one of your jokes. I like to come in on one of your jokes and go out on one of your jokes if I can. If you can, if you get a chance to, send something, it can be absolutely any joke that you like that we can come in and out of. It will post on Monday. I will send you the link. You were fantastic. This was great. Thank you so much for sharing with us and making time with us. That's one of the best parts about getting back into comedy the last few months is, as much as it's awful, I've met some great people. I absolutely love talking comedy. Like, all the podcasts I listen to are some dinosaur legendary comics and, as Saturday Night Live people and everybody in between. And, I'm very, very lucky. I have 2 mentors out in Los Angeles, one who runs a comedy store on Friday nights, and another guy, Dante the comic, who I think he manages like 300 comics, and, he's been doing it for 30 years. Yeah, no, if you look him up, he's like, I think whenever like Last Comic Standing, like season 1 or 2, he was like second runner up, but he's been doing comedy for 30 years. And just the advice I get, Sally was on our podcast about a year ago. I was just on her podcast. She's interesting. She is a 30-year touring comic and a 30-year fetish porn actress. And wow. She has a special on Amazon, on Amazon Prime. She's absolutely great. But it is like just talking to people like them, talking to you, we had Jim Colton on. I don't know if you know Jim, but he's another Boston comic who's been doing it for 30 years. I really, for every 50 shitheads I have to see at the safe, get up there. You look, if you want to kill at the safe, go to open mic at the safe on Tuesday. That's where I met Katie, and just go up there and say, "Oh my God, I'm too high to remember what I was going to say, but I got so high I shit myself at work." And that room is gonna lose it. You're gonna own that room, and then you go home and you're like, "Really? I sold that?" Like you know what I mean? It's like you know what? Sean Hannity did bring up a good point tonight. You know what I mean? You feel just as dirty, like, you know what I mean? If you sell out.
I'm gonna have to get back there because I was going when it started that Tuesday night at the safe, and it's been a little while just because of I've been traveling a lot and my brother passing away. It was crazy.
Sorry for your loss.
Oh well, thank you. It's in a weird way, it's like helping me. I think that's part of the whole process. But
Ren's trying to move it someplace else. He's going to try to move the safe. It's an okay venue, and the same thing. Like Concept 6, the guys there are sweethearts. The guy Scott, I think, runs the open mic, but it's not a great open mic place. It's just not conducive for funny.
No, it's set up really weird.
Actually, and my son's going to go next week. A couple of you lol kids, because I told Jim this a year ago. I'm like, dude, Coffee and Cotton, have a weekly show, a bi-weekly show, and now they have a monthly show. That's actually pretty good. Right downstairs, it's the last Thursday of the month, and I think it's good because it's well lit, and you get a lot of college kids, so it's not all just punching down, these 25-year-old kids trying to be the new Andrew Dice Clay, type thing. So, but
my God, if you guys ever do a show where you want like random stories of the shit conversations I've had at these open mics, please count me in.
Oh,
to your
100%. No, like I will have you back on, because like I said, I mean, it's like I like talking the whole process, and even there's so many shitty experiences at these open mics, and I sit there and think, this is going to be a great story. This is going to wind up in something else. Like it's worth sitting through it, because like every 3 or 4 comics will have a line that I'll come home with, and I'll be like, oh my God. Like the comic had a line the other night that I called Joe on the way home. I'm like, oh, this one guy had this line and we had a great laugh over it, and then I think all the shitty stuff, I'm like, this will wind up in a script. This will wind up in a set. It will all be worth having gone through this, but I will let you get on with your Saturday. Thank you so very much again. This was awesome.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you guys so much. It was so great to chat with you.
Drive by